wealthy and be pious. Be wealthy and be pious. So we're not saying that the believer has to live a miserable life and live in poverty and live in a way which is inherently going to be miserable and sad and depressed for us. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that's what our expectation should be either. We should be ambitious. And we should have goals in life. And we should be wealthy. As long as that wealth comes from halal means. And as long as we are pious, that goes with it. Have the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as I mentioned earlier on. And the difference is between the believer and the non-believer when it comes to benefiting from the world or the worldly materials, is that the believer sees through the temporary desires of this world. The believer isn't bogged down by and even worships those material things like money and so on and so forth. And to prove this point, the evidence that I have for this is there is a very famous story. I believe it was Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, but I will double check that. But it's a famous scholar anyway, who was very reputable, had a high standard of living in his society at the time, very well dressed, on the best mode of transport, and he was traveling through the city, and there was a poor, destitute, non-Muslim selling oil, I believe. Poor. And he pulled up the scholar and he asked him, he said, your Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that this dunya is a prison for the believer and a paradise for the disbeliever. He said, but look at me. I'm poor, I'm destitute, I don't believe in your God. I don't believe in your messenger. And look at me, I'm poor. How is this a paradise for me? And look at you, very well dressed, smart, on horseback, with reputability, with credibility, with social standing, and you're a believer. How is this a prison for you? And the scholar of Islam, he replied, yes, that is true. But if you knew the reality of what might await you in the next life, this is a paradise for you in comparison to that. And if you knew what awaits me as the believer in the next life, that's a paradise compared to this. So we have to put things in context, my dear brothers and sisters. If we know what the reality is in the next life, which is the eternal life, we can put things in context of what is truly a prison and what is truly Jannah. So even if we have the point I'm trying to make here, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, is so even if we have the nice things of this dunya and live like kings and queens and have lots of money and materialism, as long as it is earned in a halal way, as long as you have piety, as long as you have taqwa of Allah, and you stay away from those things which are haram for you and not allowed for you, and you restrict yourselves in that context, then there's nothing wrong with that, of having that wealth. And that doesn't negate the prison-like status, because we are still bound by the restrictions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put on us. And we understand that the paradise of bliss that is to come in the next life will be far greater than everything that we amassed of bliss in this life. And the opposite applies too. The opposite applies too. So I make this regular dua. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I try to remind my own family about this and my own children regularly. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the best of both worlds. The best in this life and the best in the next life. And for the believer, it's a win-win. Wallahi, my dear brothers and sisters, it's a win-win for the believer. If we only knew. If we did what we were supposed to do, and did it with ihsan, and with ikhlas, with sincerity, we would be the best in this life and the best in the next life. That's the fact of the matter. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from the hellfire. Oh Allah, protect us from the hellfire. Oh Allah, protect us from the real prison, the hellfire that's to come. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us Jannat al-Firdaus. I ask Allah to give us the best in this life and the next life, and to protect us from the adhab that's to come in the qabr, in the grave. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.